Welcome to another episode of the Clarity Digital Podcast. I'm your host, Al Safadi, and today I'm joined by veteran search engine optimization expert Ash Nallawalla. With over 2 decades of experience, Ash offers valuable insights on the future of search, touching on the impact of AI, branding, and evolving strategies. Let's dive in. Hi, Ash. How are you doing today?
Hi, Al. Really great to connect
Yeah,
and
likewise.
happy to speak to your audience and happy to answer any of your questions. So let's go.
Yeah, I've been following you for quite some time, so I know about you. We are Facebook friends. We are on each other's. I'll be connected on LinkedIn. But for our audience, if you don't mind introducing yourself, maybe give us a little bit of background about your personal, professional journey, that would be great.
Yeah, this is my fourth career. I started life as an accountant for about 7, 8 years and didn't like it. I moved to Australia from New Zealand and I joined the Air Force. So that was my second career. But whilst I was in the Air Force, I took a liking for personal computers and computers in general. So I got some qualifications in computing. And then I entered basically what's better described as marketing rather than computing. But I was a fairly technical marketer in some large, well-known companies. So I started with Unisys, which was more famous back then. I don't know how famous it is now, but they used to make really big computers. And I worked for Hayes Modems. So I got some of my excitement with computers, with modems, and that kind of got me into the internet. I started when I was doing my grad dip in computing. Since the late 80s, I've had an email address long before the general public had access in Australia. So I think the earliest evidence of me on the internet is around 1988. I signed an RFC, I signed my approval or my vote for an RFC on some topic that I've forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
And this knowledge of computers has always served me well. I had to build my first computer, an Australian designed Z80 based computer called the Microbee.
Mm-hmm.
And when the internet came for the general public, I was ready for it. And so I started the internet on Unix and I used the NCSA Mosaic browser. So this is all before it was available on Windows computers. Being very keen on computers, I was very active in the PC user group movement. And I was lucky to be in Melbourne because Melbourne, for many years, has had the world's largest PC user group. It wasn't initially the largest, which happened to be Boston. The Boston Computer Society had like 30,000 members and they shut down in the late 90s, I think, before they were forced to shut down because they couldn't sustain the cost of large building and staff and all those things. So they closed before they had to close. And that made Houston the largest club. And then they closed down or they decreased in size. And this is all thanks to the internet. So I convinced my user group committee to offer an internet service. And I set one up in my living room at home. So I set up an ISP for our club members with initially 200 subscribers, one phone line, and then it became 300 subscribers. And
Wow.
soon I decided that building a website for our members was a good idea. And I knew how to write basic HTML 1.0
Mm-hmm.
using Notepad.
Yeah.
And these are little things that I credit just being lucky in the right place at the right time. Bearing in mind that I was a senior executive in my third career, I was country manager for a US listed company. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was also in the web industry. It made web configurators. And so I always had my hands on websites. Even before that company, when I worked for Hayes Modems, I built their Asia Pacific websites. They're very simple ones that I'd be embarrassed to show today. I've got screenshots of them, but for 1996, 1997, they were okay.
Yeah.
They had pictures of the modems, they had addresses, phone numbers, and at least we could tick a box saying, yeah, we have a website. So, but as I was getting older, I was reaching my upper 40s, the dot-com crash occurred. And very rapidly, I realized that, I got laid off as well from Macromedia, which is now part of Adobe. But I'd done so well in SEO for my own website, which I built after I left Macromedia, a consulting business, consulting in CRM. Now, the beautiful part of it is that that website never, ever transacted. It's still my primary domain for sentimental reasons, my email address, but it's never ever consulted in CRM because after the dot-com crash, no one was buying expensive CRM solutions. However, the fact that it ranked #1 for CRM consultant for almost 10 years, that word got out, and a friend of mine in San Mateo, California, Northern California, suggested I do the SEO for his client, which is now a listed company in the US called Ring Central. Yes. And they sell 800 numbers and other things. So at the age of 48, I was starting in SEO, and I had the advantage that there were not many SEOs back then in the early 2000s. And that's a key difference. Today, someone age 48 will struggle to start an SEO. Sure. If they're looking for employment. Sure, they can work for themselves. So 23 years later, I retired full-time from full-time work, but I've continued consulting. I've got a steady client. I work for them one day a month. And I'm not interested in full-time work anymore. I'm writing some books on SEO, finishing some books. So that's a long way of introducing myself.
No, that was great. And, I had a similar background, computer science degree, did my own business because I got laid off during a dot-com crash. And mine was a little bit later. And that gives you the strength because you come from a technical background, and a lot of SEOs are more on the content side or link building side. Having that technical foundation is probably what helped you with your, right?
Yeah, when I think about learning hexadecimal numbers, and you'll appreciate how useful hexadecimal numbers are for images when it comes to screen colors, web safe colors, and so on. So it's very difficult to replicate what I studied and happened to learn. I go back even to the 1970s when I was doing a Bachelor of Commerce in New Zealand. That's the first time I touched a computer. There were bits and pieces that somehow connect from time to time. So one of my hobbies is amateur radio. So again, in the early days, I had to use a soldering iron and build. I have built two transceivers from scratch, right from the circuit boards, and drilling holes and soldering components. And my first day in computer science, the lecturer was drawing the circuit diagram on the blackboard, and I thought, am I in the wrong room? What's he doing? And he was drawing a flip-flop. Circuit is the fundamental building block of memory. And I just got it. This is how memory chips in computers work. So Anyway, I've managed to consolidate a lot of disconnected information in my past, used it usefully in my SEO career these last 23, 24 years.
Yeah. Well, let's just fast forward to today because SEO, in some sense, it has changed, and in some ways, it hasn't. What is the state of SEO today, in your opinion, as of 2025, January 2025?
I'm concerned for the SEO industry, and I think only a handful of SEOs are keeping up with it. They're the ones who are aware of what Google is doing. Some things it's doing okay, some things not so okay. And that can be crucial. I'm seeing SEOs thinking of leaving the industry or have been forced to leave the industry. They are concerned about AI, especially AI generated content. There are employers who are reducing their staff numbers because they think AI can replace their staff. The other concern I have is I'm reading comments by prominent SEOs who are saying that they are reducing the number of searches that they are performing directly on Google.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, they are using an LLM for some of the questions. I fully agree with that. I mean, this morning I was doing some searches using Copilot
Mm-hmm.
on as a Microsoft
Yeah.
AI. So it's on my desktop, it's on my status bar, so it's always there. Sure, I could type Gemini and go to Google's AI, but
Yeah.
I've got an icon I can just click. So somehow Bing is getting a lot of traffic from me and from other people that it
Yeah.
never did before. So Google's share in the market is diminishing. I feel that some of their algorithms are broken, or at least broken in the sense we were expecting them to work, and now suddenly they don't work like they used to. So SEOs are needing to adapt. And any old-fashioned SEO who's simply working off a checklist and doing things that worked 20 years ago,
Yeah.
they'll find that unless they fluke something, their tactics will be largely worthless and they will lose their clients and then they'll wonder what happened. So that's my current observation on what's going on.
I have to agree with you. It was actually yesterday or day before yesterday, we got a lead from our website, and we tend to ask, where did you find us? And he said, "Oh yeah, I was in ChatGPT looking for an enterprise SEO consultant, and you were one of the names that popped up." I was like, "Whoa!" And of course, ChatGPT looks at different websites, probably, and I'm guessing maybe I came up because I have content on LinkedIn about enterprise SEO on our website, on YouTube, kind of all over the place. I used to guest post on some of those SEO platforms, so that's probably why. But and I had myself on LinkedIn for a long time, enterprise SEO consultant. So directed that person to me. That looks like now SEO have to become better marketers, not only focus on Google, but also focus on social, focus on content, focus on YouTube.
So I believe that branding is going to become more important than it ever did.
Mm-hmm.
And SEOs need to be aware of what that entails. My concern is that some SEOs have come from entirely a coding background. They're just IT people with no exposure to marketing. Um, if you ask them what's a brand, they might think of a logo and think a logo is a brand. It's not. It's content is very much a part of your brand. Perhaps it's one of the largest elements of the brand. And so how you write, having a brand voice, for example, if you're in marketing, you hear that term all the time. My background is largely in-house SEO
Mm-hmm.
in large enterprises. So I was fortunate that I've been working with brand voice and brand visibility for a long time. And this is not just from an SEO angle, it's from a total all of marketing angle. So SEOs need to really understand what they have to do to succeed. And what you've achieved, if your names come up in an AI search, you're doing something right.
Yeah.
ChatGPT now has found you, and it thinks that you've got a great brand for that particular search term. And so it's surfacing your URL. And that's how someone reached out to you. That I find is the challenge for busy SEO agencies, I think. There's a tendency, I consult to some agencies, and there is a tendency to stick to checklists because from the management viewpoint, they reason that if they're charging very little, and I'm really concerned that some agencies are charging very little.
Yeah.
Because I hate to understand, or I hate to see how they can deliver something meaningful for, say, $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
And this is the full service agency. I don't mean someone who does a very discrete task for that, but someone who says, oh, we'll get you on the first page of Google, just 1,000 a month. They're not going to achieve that unless the client lives in a small country town with 10 people in one motel. Sure, that motel will rank number one. But in the normal case, they need to understand, how do we make this brand famous in their context, perhaps not globally, perhaps in their city or even their suburb. It's entirely possible to rank a pizza shop for a suburb because you have an added element of local SEO. But if you're thinking of a moderately large company, and in Australia that could be 10,000 employees, that would be a moderately large company. Now they would need to invest in branding. And for the SEO, it depends on the size of the company. They need to find out who's allowed to create content. If they're not allowed to write the content, they need to influence the people who are writing the content. So they need to be part of the chain of content. So I'd just like to briefly mention the fact that I'm writing some books. I published one 2 years ago. It was aimed at managers. The challenge for me is that I've got 3 other books in the boil, but I've not finished them. And it's not as if I couldn't just wrap them up and put them out there. But the concern is I don't know whether the audience is ready for them because my audience is not SEO operators. My audience is managers and the C-suite. And they need to be conscious that AI is relevant to them one way or the other. And they need to make that content available to the LLM. In my last job, I had a senior manager come out to me and say that they were searching Bing, and they asked which is a good car selling platform, because that's the company I work for is an international platform for buying and selling cars, trucks, and other vehicles in multiple languages. And Bing mentioned 2 or 3 smaller brands, but not us. And if you went to Google and you did the same query, sure, we ranked number 1 for most things. But here was Bing, seemingly unaware. This is in the Bing AI. It was, I think in those days they call it chat, Bing chat. I found that we had actively blocked CCBot, which is a common crawl bot. And we had blocked it years before there was a ChatGPT. And I wasn't around, but my guess is that they were trying to block, say, Wikipedia's bot and some other bots that were using CCBot. And the early iterations of ChatGPT used CCBot. And maybe Bing's crawler also used the same. So naturally, they weren't even aware of our brand. So we had to have an internal discussion that we better open up to the LLM crawlers.
Yeah.
If we want to be recommended, sure, there is a concern, and that was part of the discussion. Okay, but what if these LLMs learn all our intellectual property and they crawl through our database and they know everything about cars that we've published? People won't need to come to us. They'll simply get their answers from the crawler, from the LLM crawler's output.
Mhm.
But taking everything into consideration, it was considered more important that we should expose our content, and that's a decision they took. And we checked that the other platforms had done the same. They were not blocking those crawlers. So these are the types of considerations that are really important, and large enterprises need to have this conversation inside and with their consultants, and then make a decision.
Sure. These are great insights that you're providing, and I 100% agree. That may even include just forgetting about the whole idea of gated content. Let's just make the whole thing available. I know crawlers can probably bypass the forums, but just to be safe, right? If you have a brochure or webinar, just make it non-gated. Just make it as available as you can. I do have a question about branding. Traditionally, when you work with an branding expert, they focus on logos and color palettes and stuff like that. Obviously, now LLMs are a huge part of the ecosystem of branding. How do you bridge the gap between traditional branding experts and now SEOs want to get into branding, where traditionally their focus has been so much on old school PR, fonts and colors and things of that nature, where we're coming and say, no, you got to do more so we can influence the LLMs and AI agents in near future. Do you have any recommendations on how we can bridge the gap so the technical people can work better with the creative people?
It helps if the SEO has a good command of the language. So in our case, it's English.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to have the confidence of backing themselves up. And I'll give you an actual example from my background. I won't name the company or the industry, but one of the large companies I work for had a very senior marketing person who insisted on everything being decided by the marketing department. And this included the content on the website. SEO was a new two-person department, so it didn't have the clout, even though we had a very supportive VP. And one word popped up in our recommendations, and we said we should use the word cheap. And this caused quite a discussion. And the senior VP on the marketing side said, no way, we are not a cheap brand. We are an exclusive brand. We cannot use the word cheap. So I said, you just type that word and you'll find that in the search, our competitors are ranking. We are not ranking because we just don't have that word anywhere on our site. And they kind of got the point, and they were really struggling, saying, but we have positioned ourselves as a premium brand. How could we? We're not even cheap. We are expensive. So I said, okay, but we need someone to come through the door, namely through the website door. Let them appreciate what we're offering. And yes, we are more expensive, but they might appreciate that quality has a cost to it, and they'll buy from us. And And this created an additional complication, namely legal, because legal sometimes jumps into the conversations and will object to certain language. And so they were also a little concerned about the word cheap when they thought there could be a legal challenge that we are misleading consumers. So in the end, we came to some sort of an agreement, and I got away with using the word cheap in the title tag.
Mm-hmm.
And I showed them in a modern browser, unlike the earliest browsers when you could read the entire title tag at the top of the browser bar. Today, most people have a dozen tabs there, and by the time you're looking at tiny tabs, you can't read all the words anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, you'll read them in the SERP, which I didn't want to mention, but that's how I got away with it. And they agreed that, sure, put it in we call it the code. So we're putting it in the code. It's not directly in the body of the page. You can't see the word cheap in the body of the page. And that's how we got past that. So knowing language can really help, because one of the related SEO concepts is entities. It's not strictly keywords anymore. And for a long time, it hasn't been. I'd say at least 15 years. Some of the early SEO started recognizing entities, and I've been measuring visibility at an entity level. I don't worry too much about individual keyword rankings, but how visible is the whole entity?
Mm-hmm.
And the entity can be the brand. So if your entity is a motorbike, the whole bike is the brand. It's not whether you've got shiny spokes or whatever individual elements you have on the motorbike. So I would say that SEOs need to pay attention and improve their own English if they can. I'm sure I don't have any way of knowing, but anecdotally, a page that is written in good English, clear English, I'm not saying use fancy words, just clear English that describes the entity, that is something that the SEO needs to argue for if they're
Sure.
getting pushback from marketing, because sometimes you'll get pages where it's simply a catchy phrase as your H1 or the title tag. And in isolation, that catchy phrase doesn't sort of describe anything. It might be a throwaway phrase that young people use or a niche audience uses, but no one searches by that phrase. So sometimes you do need to make a case and perhaps compromise a little and do some multivariate testing. And often testing is the only way to convince a difficult colleague from say pure marketing, traditional marketing versus digital marketing.
Really good insights and advice there. So I want to ask you a controversial question. We both have used tools such as Moz, SEMrush, the so-called enterprise SEO platforms you may have used like Bright Edge and Conductor. Are those tools still relevant in today's SEO world, in your opinion? Or do you think SEOs need to take a step back from that, like you said earlier, like how you want to get away from the checklist SEO? Are we also getting away from the tools SEO and thinking more creatively and, like you said, improve our English and storytelling?
I was unfortunate or fortunate, it depends on your way of looking at it. Very few of my managers allowed me to buy subscription tools. They, especially tools where it had a varying price based on usage.
Mhm.
Um, for, for them, getting an annual budget was a difficult time of year. And once they got the budget, that was locked in. You didn't want to ask for an extra $100 or $200 in some cases, because they had to do paperwork and that disrupted their own work. So it was easy for them to say, no, if it's a fixed price, we can talk about it. But if you're going to be asking more money one month and less money another month, I have to make all these variations. So it so happened in my very last job it was the first time I used Bright Edge. And I used very little of it, but I did like some of the tools it had, especially the competitor tools and the keyword tools.
Yeah.
It was very expensive.
Yeah.
And I personally wouldn't have paid for it had it been my own money.
Yeah.
But if someone else was paying for it and the management was happy to extend it, I didn't mind. Some of these tools are sold at the senior level, which is okay. It's not coming out of my pocket. But sometimes I had this irony that if we had one of those expensive tools, it was impossible to ask for a smaller tool because they said, hey, but we've got this, we've got that. How can't you use the keyword tool from, say, Keyword Planner? Why do you also need a tool there? Or for backlinks, you get backlinks Majestic was the exact example I was thinking of. Bright Edge includes Majestic. What they don't tell you is that you don't get the full feature of
You don't.
Majestic.
It's just an API, right?
Yeah. And so I couldn't investigate my competitors' backlinks to
Yeah.
Bright Edge.
Mm-hmm.
All I can see is our own backlinks,
Right.
which is good, but it doesn't replace having a dedicated backlink tool.
Yeah.
So my recent reading is alarming for the SEOs who are relying on some of these tools because Google is now enforcing JavaScript. And those tools have JavaScript turned off. And so by doing that, they might be hiding their trail. But Google's decided that, well, if JavaScript's turned off, I'm not giving you anything.
Yeah.
So they will be scrambling for alternatives. I've personally never felt the need for some of those tools. I'm really capable of making my own assessments, simply using Google as a search tool and some simple tools that I've got. And Screaming Frog is offline tool, so I'm not stopped by anything. I can change its headers and use VPNs and do clever things to get around simple barriers. And I feel that a lot of SEO can be done without the need for expensive subscription tools. There might be eye candy for clients, or some agencies might think that, hey, here's a great tool for getting competitor information. But at every company I've been to, I've had access to these tools, even though my employer was not paying for them. Other kind people let me share their logins, and I've used them lightly. I would deliberately not use them for my employer because ethically I felt that my employer needs to pay for the tools. I'm not going to use borrowed tools, but I'd use the tools to look at competitors. Then I'd use the same tools to look at our own traffic, and it was nowhere near the traffic. And this is going back some years, but in the early 2000s, I worked for the Yellow Pages in Australia. And the traffic estimates from third-party tools was completely laughable.
Yeah.
And I found out why. Because these traffic tools need a proxy. So they contract with large ISPs to give them high volume, depersonalized data. So they can get counts of visits to websites. However, one of those, because Yellow Pages was owned by Telstra, which is Australia's largest telephone company, Telstra also owned a big ISP in those days called Big Pond. Now, Big Pond did not work with any of these tool companies. They would not release the data. And because of that, and Big Pond was a huge ISP in Australia. So I don't know if it was the largest, but it was one of the largest. So these tools were missing this large piece of the jigsaw. And I imagine there are similar stories everywhere that they have to sign agreements with a handful of large ISPs, but it'll never be 100%. So it's a quality of that extrapolation that they make and the guesswork that they have to make to give you an estimate.
Yeah.
And they'll never be accurate. So sure, it's fine if you're comparing things relatively, because you can say, well, at a relative level, this brand is doing better than that brand in terms of organic traffic. But that's all you need, all you can get out of the tool. So I've not felt that I've suffered from not having subscriptions to the usual list of tools that you would name.
Yeah, I remember my early days as an in-house SEO. When I asked for one of those tools, I had a very smart CMO, Andy, who said, well, this tool is going to cost you $2,500 a month. And this is back in 2008. Like, do you want to spend that $2,500 for a subscription tool, or do you want me to approve $2,500 to create more content? And that was the best challenge he had. I'm like, no, more content, because we know content is king. Like you said, at the time I was using SEO book. I don't know if you remember that, the plugin. And I'm like, okay, I just work with what I have. And but when I got into the agency side and consulting side, the reporting really matters. Like we use right now SEMrush, just a normal SEMrush, not the enterprise. And it really helps us in the reporting and things. But you're 100% right. When it comes to competitive analysis, it's nowhere close to what the reality, and you can test it for yourself. Let me ask you just a little bit about the user behavior changes. It's not just the LLMs, but also newer generation, Gen Z. They're on TikTok and YouTube a lot. They do a lot of video searches. And now SEOs also have to learn about how to optimize videos, and that's a little bit more challenging to do. What are some of your insights and recommendations on how to go about that?
The SEOs have needed to optimize video, especially for YouTube, for a long time. And some of the smarter ones have been doing that. So getting the transcript for the video used to be a big challenge. That's become easier now with AI tools that can just process a video and give you, I'd say, 95% accurate transcripts. It may not get all the accented words or some peculiar jargon, but that needs a human to fix the 5% and fix the transcript, and then you can sync the transcript with the actual video. So that part has become easier. The difficulty for the SEO is not having access to the search traffic. So video search traffic, voice search traffic, all those, there are some elements there where you need to do guesswork and try and get the best numbers that you can. And people say that even the numbers shown to you by Google are never 100%. There might be approximations. Google only shows you 1,000 results of anything. So people have to operate a little bit in the dark. It's very true that the younger generation is doing searches in other platforms, and TikTok's a great example. And sometimes people are watching TikTok directly on their phones, but I don't have it on my phone. But if I watch it, it's because someone shared a TikTok video through another platform. So, and I'm on at least 6 social media platforms. and people are sharing links on those other platforms. So I think the SEO needs to treat analytics data as a sample.
Yeah.
And just assume that, yes, there will always be traffic that they will never hear about, but it is
Sure.
happening. And okay, they can do A/B testing to see whether something that was only mentioned on TikTok and nowhere else, and if they can prove that, then they know that TikTok is working for them.
Yeah. Yeah. TikTok in particular does a really good job pushing products. I have bought things from them. They first to get you hooked and scrolling, and then an ad comes from TikTok Shop, and because it's a video ad, it's a lot more persuasive. Well, we're running out of time. And we can talk about this forever, but where do people find you? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your consulting or your agency or the books you're writing, if you can share right now.
Okay, my name is rather unique. I'm sure it's unique because there are very few people with my surname in the world. So as long as you roughly get my spelling right, you'll find me. So I'm on LinkedIn. I have my own domain, which is ash.nallawalla.com. I'm on my blog, which is called netmagellan.com. So Magellan was a great explorer, so I named my blog after him. It's an old blog, but I write things in it maybe once or twice a year.
Mm-hmm.
And my consulting domain, which I mentioned earlier, is crm911.com.
Mm-hmm.
And 911 implies help, the phone
Sure.
number for the US. Although a German client once said, "Oh, you must love our Porsche 911 cars." I said, yeah, I do like them.
Yeah, that
I
too,
don't tell
right?
them what's wrong. But I'm on crm911.com, so it's very easy to find me. My book is called Accidental SEO Manager, so that's the last domain where you'll find me, and that's accidentalseomanager.com.
I have to get it because I'm an accidental SEO expert, and I want to call myself more of an accidental SEO and SEM expert. But anyhow, it's been a pleasure having you on. We should have you again. I know we can talk about SEO, and SEO is changing, so it would it would make sense to have, SEO veterans like you again. So I really, really appreciate your time, and you have yourself a great day.
Yeah, thank you, Al. It was great talking to you and to your audience. We'll catch you another time.
For sure. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Bye.